here to talk about a very important Greek myth, Pandora's jar. Now, you've probably heard of Pandora's box. This is the story of Pandora's jar. Pandora is the first female according to Greek mythology. And so we're going to jump right in, and remember, we're going to talk about values and what this says about Greek society. So without further ado, let's jump on into Pandora's jar. Hesiod is writing here, and they're just going to make Pandora. There's all sorts of backstory, but we're just going to get into it. So here we are, mid-stride in the construction or the creation of Pandora. So said the father of men and gods and laughed aloud. And he bade famous Hephaestus make haste and mix earth with water, and to put in it the voice and strength of humankind, and fashion a sweet, lovely maiden shape, like to the immortal goddesses in face. Okay, what's going on here? Hephaestus is a god of the hearth. We don't really have hearths. They're sort of fireplaces. He's also the god of blacksmithing and stuff like that. So he's a maker god, and he's putting all this stuff together. Other folks are helping, right? And Athena to teach her needlework and the weaving of the varied web. Okay, so Athena is this goddess, and she's going to teach Pandora how to do these things. And then Aphrodite's coming. Aphrodite to shed grace upon her head, and, wait for it, cruel longing and cares that weary the limbs. What? I thought this was going to be a nice, what's happening? And he, this is Zeus, charged Hermes the guide, the slayer of Argus, to put in her a shameless mind and a deceitful nature. That's right. That last line reads, to put in her a shameless mind and a deceitful nature. Myths are important because they encode and perpetuate the values that we hold. And when we look at this Greek myth, it should become immediately apparent to you that Greeks do not value equality the same way that we do modernly. There was a kind of natural order, and men were superior, right? And so women would be subordinated. Now, women are still wrongfully subordinated in our culture, right? There's lots of sort of sociological data for stuff like this, but it was even worse in ancient Greece. So notice this line where I draw your attention to put in her a shameless mind and a deceitful nature. It's baked right into the society that women are deceitful and shameless. So it's fair to say that there is a profound hatred and suspicion of women in ancient Greece. Now, what happens is Zeus makes this beautiful jar. The jar gets given to Epimetheus, who is Pandora's husband, and eventually Pandora opens the jar, right? Now, here's the line from that. But the woman took off the great lid of the jar with her hands and scattered all these, and her thought caused sorrow and mischief to men. So she opens up this jar. There are a number of demons inside. They get out and populate the world, and that explains why the world is such a terrible place. But, so the story goes, there's still something left inside the jar, inside the box, at the very end. What is it? It's hope. There is still a gem of hope, and it's left, and that's how the story's supposed to go. Now, the jar versus the box, right? If you've heard of Pandora, you've heard of Pandora's box in all likelihood. Why would you pick a jar over a box? What's the difference? Initially, it's just an error in translation. And I think the error occurs in the Middle Ages, but I don't recall off the top of my head. Somebody's translating, they translate that word wrong, and it sticks. So Pandora's box is what we're stuck with. But the original Greek actually uses the word jar. What would the difference be? Well, the clue has to do with the values encoded in the myth. Classicists say the jar represents the womb. So what does this say? Well, it's a way for Greek culture to kind of understand what's going on. Men are aware that they cannot procreate on their own. And so they need to pass on their line because this is a very patriarchal type of society where men run things. but they know that ultimately they're kind of dependent on women for procreation, right? They cannot sire their own, they cannot themselves have a child. So in this myth, there's this kind of concession, right? As the Greeks would see it. It's obviously not a concession, it's just a fact, and it gets warped that way by culture. But they have to acknowledge the ability of a woman to bear children within a system that automatically, at the same time that it acknowledges that, it also acknowledges and acknowledges her with a deceitful nature. So it subordinates her, right? And in forcing women to adopt a kind of inferior status, this is what we would call misogyny today, where you might have a group of people, all of whom are polite and nice, but they will work to keep gender roles in place and to keep women subordinated. So now the hope. Okay, so I'm kind of destroying this story for us. But isn't this a nice story, right? Isn't this about hope? Remember, only hope remained there in an unbreakable home within under the rim of the great jar, and did not fly out at the door, for ere that the lid of the jar stopped her. Okay, well, people always think of this modernly as a nice story. When I was a kid, this story was told to me, and it was like, oh, and hope's left. Isn't that nice? Mankind always has hope. Humankind always has hope, right? No. There is, remember, this was a jar of evils. Hope is left in the jar, and the worst kind of hope is, of course, false hope. And you can imagine an ancient world prior to the advent of medical technology, evidence-based medicine, where people would routinely die randomly at all ages. People didn't live very long, and their quality of life wasn't as high as ours is today. In such a world where you don't have control over the environment, and you don't have control over something as simple as a toothache that will kill you within a day, you sort of need to understand that hope can be false, and that's a value encoded deeply within this story. Okay, so you've got enough now to go ahead and finish the next quiz. It's only a few questions. Kill that one and then come back. Okay, thanks a lot. Good luck. Peace.